Richard, I wouldn't ever want to argue with you. You have your British education and your British accent, and but you seem kinder than, say, Christopher Hitchens, who I would never argue with.
Well, let's not deal in national stereotypes here. The British can be kind, and the British can be aggressive as well.
Well, my comment to you is that I don't believe in a God or a superior being. I think that, like Marx, I believe that religion is the chains of the masses, and much evil has been done in the name of religion. At the same time, and this is not something that can be argued, I believe, because I don't care to argue it. My experience of the universe is that it is streaming with light and intelligence and energy, and on a personal level, I feel that as spirit. And this is from my own personal experience. So it's not something that I would attempt to convince you of or attempt to submit to your examination.
I think we're playing with words here. I think we probably agree, though we might not use quite the same words. The universe is streaming with life, intelligence, yes, and science is trying to understand how it comes into being, and very, very difficult it is. It's a very profoundly difficult problem. It's a problem that our science has made great strides in understanding, and will continue to do so. Spirit, you use the word spirit. Well, you can use the word spirit to apply to the sort of, not mystical, but the sort of exultant feeling of wonder that Einstein felt when contemplating the universe. Einstein even went so far as to use the word God, although he was adamant that he didn't believe in God as a personal being. So in the first chapter of the God Delusion, I talk about Einsteinian religion as something that I can subscribe to, and Carl Sagan would subscribe to, and I think many scientists would. But it isn't supernatural. I suspect actually that future science, when it gets to grips with all that there is to know about the cosmos, about the origin of the universe, about multidimensional space, reality will turn out to be far more wonderful than any theologian has ever dreamed. And if you want to use the word spiritual for that, then I'm with you, except for the use of the word. So I don't think we disagree, but I think that if you use a word like spiritual, you lay yourself open to misunderstanding, and make no mistake, people are very eager to misunderstand, and they will think you're talking about a supernatural God. They may even think you're talking about Jesus or Allah or whatever particular God they happen to have been brought up with. So my advice would be, don't use a word like spiritual, but use the same sentiment in some other way.
Can you comment on the recent scientific investigations into the God gene and possibly related to Freud's future of evolution? Because he seemed to have a very unscientific explanation that seemed to fit very well.
When you talk about the God gene, when you talk about the anything gene, you've got to be very careful what you're talking about, because it's all too easy to misunderstand it as meaning that if you've got this gene, then inevitably you have the characteristic concern. So if you've got such and such a gene, then you will be religious, and if you haven't, you won't. There are some genes that work like that, in that deterministic way, this Calvinistically deterministic way, but most of them don't. Most of them contribute statistically to the likelihood that you will show some kind of characteristic, such as religiosity. The way that you can investigate this is twin studies, comparing monozygotic, identical twins, with fraternal twins who are just like ordinary brothers or sisters. And ideally what you do is you exploit the existence of pairs of twins who happen to have been brought up separately. And there aren't that many of them, a few dozen, but those that exist have been mostly tracked down and looked at. And by comparing the resemblance between pairs of twins who are monozygotic and dizygotic, reared together and reared apart, all four categories, you can work out how strong is the hereditary determination of the characteristic concerned, whether it's height or weight or musical ability, mathematical ability, or religiosity. Now, it has been suggested that religiosity does have a very high heritability. That's to say, if you have such and such a gene, you have a very high statistical probability of being religious. It doesn't seem to me to bear on the truth value of religious claims one way or the other. I think we have to decide those separately, and I think we can do that separately. I think it's scientifically interesting to know how heritable religiosity is, but it doesn't bear upon the truth value.
Dr. Dawkins, there's one thing in your book that I was puzzled about, and that is the use of the term child abuse to describe what you were talking about just a few minutes ago. I was brought up in the Lutheran tradition and taught Luther's catechism and so forth, most of which I now consider to be nonsense, maybe all of it nonsense. You were brought up in the Anglican tradition, and I have not seen anything in your writings to indicate that you feel like you were abused as a child. In fact, in Unwaving the Rainbow, you seem to express some sentimental appreciation for that upbringing. While I agree that it's regrettable that sort of thing occurs, parents teaching their children that which they most highly value, which for many people is religion, could hardly be considered child abuse in any normal sense of the term. Could you explain why you chose that metaphor?
I use child abuse most strongly, I think, when talking about teaching children about hell, because that, I think, is psychological child abuse. I find it'd be quite hard to dissent from that. I hope I haven't used the word child abuse for all religious education. I don't think I have. I think a slightly milder form of child abuse is the labeling of children, the tying around the neck of a child of a label that says you are a Lutheran child, or you are an Anglican child, or you are a Catholic child, or a Muslim child. That, I think, is child abuse in that it categorizes the child for the whole of its life, very often, with opinions which the child is too young to know about. But I agree with you that that's not as bad as telling a child about hell, which I think really is proper child abuse, very likely as bad as physical child abuse, sexual child abuse, which Roman Catholic priests, for example, are so often accused of. I told the story in the book of how in Dublin, talking to a Dublin audience, I was asked about the then highly publicized cases of Irish and American Roman Catholic priests sexually abusing children. And I said that I thought that in many cases that was less harmful than some of the doctrines of bringing up the children as Catholic in the first place. And I got a cheer from this Dublin audience. And again, I suspect the reason was that Ireland too has been in the grip of, in this case, a Roman Catholic theocracy for a long time. Is coming out of it now. And I think that this cheer that I got was responding to that. Maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that that tying a label around a child's neck as Catholic or Muslim, whatever it is child abuse. But sometimes it does no harm to exaggerate just a little bit in the interest of consciousness raising. Let me retract from that then and say what I want to say, which is that just as we've all been taught by feminists to flinch when we hear the phrase "one man, one vote," we should also all flinch when we hear the phrase Catholic child, Christian child, Muslim child, Protestant child. There is no such thing as a Catholic child, etc. So if you don't like child abuse, then forget child abuse for that, but do please have your consciousness raised so that you flinch when you hear the phrase Catholic child, etc.